So hi everybody. My name is Ran. I'm a VP product for a company called Beyond Trust. I was formerly at a startup name and title. We were acquired half a year ago. So actually going to talk about here about is PAM dead? And that's a great question. Beyond Trust being one of the three leaders in the PAM market. So hopefully I get to get my job after this session. But let's see if I survive it to the end. So let's start. We are going to discuss today a little bit about identity, a little bit about PAM, and how cloud actually disrupt things, and which new challenges are presented by the cloud era, and then also how do we solve the problems, how do we gain control. So let's start. So there are so many three-letter acronyms associated with identity. You see some of them in the background. We are an industry which really loves those acronyms, so I'll try to give very light overview of few of those acronyms, but definitely you are more than welcome to look at all of these later on. So generally, the common stack of identity is IDP, PAM, and IGA. Those are kind of the classics, and some companies mix and match the vendors from those three. Some of them actually try to align all three parts of the identity stack into one vendor. Formerly, there was a little bit of discrete or different offering for IDP and MFA. IDP meaning identity provider, which started from or originated from your Active Directory and then went for Federation, SSO, and then there were some MFA providers, but actually MFA and IDP or authentication go hand in hand. So these days those are more aligned. PAM, we'll talk about it in a minute, and IGA is more of identity governance and controls. How do you govern your identities, identify risk, produce report, reduce risks. So those are the three main pillars of the common identity stacks. There are some few leaders to each one of the categories. As I said before, Beyond Trust is one of the leaders in the PAM space. In the IDP, you can have Azure from Microsoft or Okta or Ping Identity, for example. In the IGA, there are two main kind of gorillas, that's SailPoint and Savient, and many other smaller vendors. But this is kind of very common stack, I would say, like those three leading vendor here for larger enterprise usually. So when you go, now we'll dive into PAM. So PAM is basically divided into some segments of the authentication market. Especially the more legacy ones, for example, the SSO into legacy systems, because modern SSO is provided mostly by your IDP, meaning your identity providers, but some systems do not adhere to modern SSO standards, yet they are very crucial for the organization. It can originate sometimes from mainframe, but in many cases servers, for example, and all sorts of legacy systems. Some of them work on SSH, and then you got SSH keys. All those technologies which are not modern SSO yet, but still it's highly important to protect them, to protect the authentication, which even when those systems were introduced into the market, the authentication and security were not that developed as is today, nor were the attack vectors, but these days you have to protect them as much as possible, even though there are legacy systems. Also, PAM includes some session recording and alerting if something went wrong with those legacy system mostly. By the way, one very important aspect of protecting those accounts is credential rotation, meaning many legacy systems just had username and password basically, or password-based authentication. So one way to protect them in these days is basically rotate the password very, very often. So people with the wrong password won't be able to enter, even though this account may be a shared account. It's maybe like admin or root or whatever. So managing all those password rotation, for example, is one of the things PAM system do. And also from access control, many cases PAM system grant certain authorization, who can apply certain roles, certain administration rights to those systems. So that's basically kind of the basics of PAM. And now here came the cloud. So things really changed. This is both technology change and conceptual change, and also expectations for the market, expectations of IT department, which were there 15 years ago, of what their role should be when a new system is introduced into their organization, and the expectation of these days are totally different. Today, like, companies use dozens, in many cases hundreds of different systems and vendors to their ongoing operations. The IT department cannot handle all aspects of those systems. Here come the cloud to protect, including the identity aspect of it. So authentication, for example, is solved by cloud vendors, and the leading providers that I mentioned before are some of the providers which really help you solve your authentication in the cloud, and really invest as an IT department, invest less time configuring and setting up your authentication, because everything is provided as a service. Session recording, again, one of the traditional PAM functionality, is now provided, or some of it provided by system audit, and maybe many people discovered that recording session, creating like those long hours clip of people typing during session, is not really effective. It provides you maybe the feeling of something which is effective, but de facto is nobody watches it. When you have system audit logs, they are searchable, much more accessible than those long hour clips. Yet, but still, access controls still remain a problem in the cloud era, and we do see that there is still big problem of permissions, basically. So this is one of the statistics that we got, that our organization would have more than tens of dozens of risky permission out there, and that crosses clouds, that crosses SaaS applications, that's also legacy. So there are many permissions out there. And if at the beginning some people thought that well, in the cloud era everything is easy, so we would have less permissions. Nowadays, people realize that cloud services became more complex, hence the permission model also also became more complex, more permissions, high-risk permissions. Many people deal with those cloud services. Also cases of shadow IT. All in all together is a big problem, not fully solved by many organizations. This was actually the premise or the something we suspected when we started Entitle, and actually we got very good market validation to this problem by now. And another statistics from another report that only 1% of the permissions are actually in use, and maybe there are some brave people out there which says, all right, in my organization it works differently. But what we've seen in many organizations, some of them realize it, many of them do not, that many permissions are long-standing permissions. Maybe they were granted 1 year ago and someone just forgot to revoke them. Maybe they were granted for people no longer in the organization yet, but still the accounts do live. The permissions are effective. And if a hacker take control of this account, he can actually utilize that, even if the person which originally was entitled for these permissions is no longer in the organization. So those are two cases of why only 1% of the permissions are actually in use. There are dozens of more cases why that happens. But that's the end result, and it's not a good result, because 1% of the permissions are in use, but 100% of the permissions can be the attack surface if someone really tries to hack into the organization. That's also why the desire for least privilege model does exist. We want to get as close as much to the 1%, the effective 1% permissions to be in place, and kind of remove those other 99%. We do want to let the organization keep on working. People need to do their job. Some of them do need more sensitive permissions than the others. That's fine. But we want just to remove all those excessive permissions. And that's really the key here. So for this problem, here comes the just-in-time access and working with zero standing privileges, meaning that we would like to get to this place where there are accounts, hopefully not using shared accounts, or using shared accounts as little as possible. Sometimes technically you don't have any other choice, from legacy reasons, from technical support reasons, from what the different services do support reasons, whatever. So reducing the number of shared accounts, and each one of the account would get privilege, sensitive privilege, only when needed, right? That's the just in time. And then when not needed, those permissions would be revoked. The account may still be in place, hopefully with as close to zero standing privilege as possible. Sometimes it means the account would be generally in a read mode or low permissions mode, and then only when needed it would elevate to high privilege mode and then get back to low privilege. And in other cases, you can actually get to zero, absolutely zero privileges. Really depends on the service, but the guideline or this desired state still exists in any case. So when you are thinking of just in time, there are three main principles of just in time for those cloud environments. So first, we want to get the user to empower them with self-service access request, meaning we want to make it as slick as possible, accessible as possible, support multiple interfaces as possible, so to meet the users, the end users, where they are. So if someone needs to do something which is out of the ordinary for him, then he would need to ask for permissions because his account is in a state which is as close to zero privileges as possible. And to make this access request as easy as possible, we want to make it as full self-service as possible, light, slick, very, very simple gamification, whatever you want, all have to be there. So to make it smooth, because this is the end user and you want to proliferate it to all end users. One of the findings that we had during our journey is that risky permissions or sensitive permissions are not only those admins which have Okta super admin roles. Yes, those are very sensitive, of course. But there are many, many others, like people with any access to the company's social accounts, people with access to Slack channels which are shared with partners, whatever. Something which sounds like less risky than admin, yes, for sure, but can cause lots of damage to the organization if used improperly. So hence it becomes very sensitive. Like if someone publishes something which shouldn't be on company's Twitter X account, that's really bad, can be bad consequences for the organization. So for example, so that was the first principle. Second one is the power faster and more accurate permissions by delegating approvers to the business unit, and I would make it more general, delegating the approval flows to whomever should be approving. So there isn't one very smart guy in the IT or in security or whatever, which actually approves every request and kind of have this metrics of responsibility and what should everyone do in his head. That doesn't work, that doesn't scale, even in smaller organizations. So what you want to do is for every business use case, find the approval process. In many cases, it can be automatic and fully audited. In some other cases, it may be the person's manager. In other cases, it may be one of the business owner. It doesn't have to be like the top manager, the ELT manager. It can be certain business analyst who's in charge of very specific part of the business. It can be a design manager assigning access rights to specific places within Figma, etc., etc. So you want to distribute this process, delegate this process as possible, so the overhead for the approvers would be as low as possible because so many people participate in it. Everyone has its own responsibility. Everyone has its own context of what is responsible. Hence, the overhead for approving excessive access rights become lower. So for the user, it's easy to request because the user interface is very inviting. For the approver, it's very easy to approve because he knows what he needs to approve. It's very aligned with his job description. So that's also easier. And definitely you want to adjust the access controls and based on the risks. So for very specific cases, you might have an approval chain. Maybe you want to approve with your manager and then approve with the VP in charge, for example. For other places, you want to approve only for users coming from specific place in the world or specific network or has a specific behavior risk score, etc., etc. So this also become risk-based decision because those those controls, those permissions can be highly sensitive. So definitely you want to put risk in this game. So those are the three basic privileges on how to do this list privileges right. So this would be the example for self-service access request, something that we put into the system that that we developed within Entitle. So we have a Slack bot, which you can see here in the screenshot. So many people do use Slack. It's very native for them, very easy for them to work with Slack bots, very easy interface. Other people might have Teams, for example, so it doesn't help them anyway that there is some Slack bot for other people. They need native Teams. And for other people, it might be like a Jira interface, Jira native interface, or ServiceNow native interface. So we want to meet the users where they are and to make the access request as native as possible. So here is actually an example why we need those distributed approvers, because what we have seen is that so many people need to approve so many services. So this is really a very small example of the different cloud services an enterprise would need, and the actual numbers is measured either by the dozens or by the hundreds. And if you really want to do it effectively and not make certain people in the IT or DevOps really know the ins and outs of every cloud service, you really need a whole village to help with the approval process that lowers the overhead for everybody, lowers the overhead from IT and DevOps, which really don't have to mess around with things that don't really understand, like maybe they understand generally how Google works, and maybe they set up part of it, but they don't understand each nuance of permission within a specific Google project, for example, which might have 1,000 permissions within it, etc., etc., etc. That's the only way to scale is to delegate and distribute the approval process. And this is how, when you are starting to align that, for example, for Salesforce, you would have a Salesforce owner, and that Salesforce owner would support the sales team. Even if that becomes too much overhead and the organization gets even bigger, it may be Salesforce owner by teams or by certain assets within Salesforce, etc., etc. So this model can actually scale be bigger than that. And this is very similar to all other departments in the organization. So basically, this is how the model scales. And as I said, it can scale even further to people owning parts of Salesforce or Atlassian or GitHub or whatever. Another aspect, as mentioned before, is the risk base. You really want to handle differently the different services, different permissions people request, in order to align the approval flow with the risk level of the request. That's how you lower the overhead of the approval process from the organization, and how you also mitigate risk. Because when you are lowering the general overhead, you can really focus and really make people accessing something more sensitive go through much more hoops, because that's more sensitive. So you can introduce, for example, MFA authentication in some cases, more people which needs to approve. So it's not only your manager, it might be business owner and manager, for example. You might want a third party to approve, and we even got cases where to access certain information of some of our customers, their customers have to approve, because this is such a sensitive information. So the approval process is or should be aligned with the risk level, and you should have all the flexibilities to match between the two, so to get overall better security and with lower overhead, so people won't be frustrated. And here comes Entitle. In Entitle, we took all those principles and like we try to implement a system which really follows those guidelines. Now, as I said, Entitle is part of Beyond Trust. Basically, we tap into the organization infrastructure, be the IDP, HR system, or on-call system. For example, we extract existing data, so not make the administrator kind of type it or rehash it all over again. And then we provide for the user very easy interface for their access request. And then using a very flexible no-code policy engine, we actually decide on each specific case what would be the approval process. After the approval process was conducted successfully and all the needed approvers actually approved each request, then we would do automatic provisioning or zero-touch provisioning to each one of the company cloud services. So the provisioning is automatic. No administrator needs to go to any system and really apply those permissions. And also revocation of the permissions is also automatic. So basically, people whose access request was expired, let's say they needed to go and do some maintenance work, admin level within Okta. They requested access to be admin for certain number of hours. The duration has passed. Now, Entitle would go and automatically revoke the duration. This is another step to be least privileged, to revoke any excessive permission, to be as just in time as possible. Maybe one more note is that Entitle also includes parts of governance and access reviews. So a manager could review all the permissions of his team members to see that no one has excessive permission from any reason, maybe historic reason, for example. And another option would be for business owner or service owner also to see who are the people who got permission for the service he's in charge of. So it may be relevant for licensing management, but even more importantly, it may be like very relevant for security reviews to see that there are no excessive permissions which are not needed there. So and Entitle actually really fuses this information. So for example, if a manager sees certain permission for one of his team members which seems a little bit off, maybe he thinks maybe it's too much, and he wants to see the context, since everything is managed in one system, in one click, he sees, all right, this permissions was actually obtained by a certain request made by the user. This request has its own context, maybe associated with customer defect, maybe like there is explanation why and when it happens. Maybe other permissions were also part of it. And then the manager has all the context, all the information to understand, well, this permission, is it excessive or is it okay actually? So actually the just-in-time engine and the governance actually go hand in hand and are not separated, as in many legacy systems where you cannot really get the context of the permissions. In many cases, you can just see long list of permissions. You cannot know why they were there. Just in time enables you very nice way to connect between the two. And basically, I hope I convinced you that there are new ways, especially in the cloud era with cloud services, to get to the goals where actually PAM wanted to get. And when PAM started with the server technologies or non-cloud technologies, this was the way to do things. Now in the cloud era, you got new tools, you got new technology, such as just-in-time. So even though the goal is the same, the tools are different. And actually, we would like to think about it is JIT is actually one of the new tools in the PAM basket, or new manifestation of PAM. PAM really wants to achieve certain goals, and just-in-time really enables it. Questions? Someone? So, okay, great question. Thank you. For companies like Beyond Trust, for example, where we have the really legacy, very vast legacy stack, really can solve any one of the traditional PAM use cases. We are now adding entitled to all the other products, other use cases. So basically, you can go to stack like that and actually combine all the principles where I just talked about and the implementation of entitled, originally created for cloud services, and entitled integrates with many cloud services, but now it also integrates with all the other products from Beyond Trust, and actually and effectively brings the whole new tools and philosophy into the traditional PAM use cases. So basically, a larger stack, which includes legacy PAM and new modern tool like just-in-time, very tightly integrated, and there are like 1,000 nuances to those integrations. But when they are tightly integrated, that's the key together.